We've got this down in the program as a Women in Fluids session, and from my point of view, I'm going to say as little as possible because I'm not a woman. But I think I will just kick off by sort of making an observation that Anne talked about the National Fluids UK Fluids Network and how great it's been, and I think that's really true. But one thing I've observed is when I go to meetings, when I see events, I'm in a big minority as a man in these events, as a white man. And so I think it's really interesting to talk about what we might be able to do as a community to encourage greater diversity in fluid dynamics. And one way of doing that is to, I guess, appeal to the experiences of people, individuals, and their own personal experiences and their thoughts and reflections on what's helped them and what could help others. So maybe that's one sort of thing we can think about as part of this panel. But maybe the best thing to do also is kick off just allowing each of the panelists to introduce themselves, say a little bit about how they got into fluid dynamics and what they're doing now. And Jane, I appreciate you're a geologist, so fantastic. So okay, so yeah, so let's. Okay.
I can use this. Hello, so my name is Claudia Castro Faccetti. Closer here? Yeah. I am a civil engineer. I studied civil engineering at the University of Cartagena in Colombia, where I'm from. After finishing civil engineering, I came to the UK to study a master in water sanitation and health engineering in the University of Leeds. And after finishing my master's, I made the decision of studying a PhD, and I studied a PhD in water management, wastewater disposal, but using CFD modeling to kind of understand it better. Following my PhD, I work as a postdoc with Cathnox on indoor air, basically ventilation in buildings, and I have since been working on that. Currently, I am the head of research and product development at indoor air quality certification company called AirRated. So that's my current role.
Do we go down the line? So hi everyone, I'm Carolanne Vouriot. So I'm a lecturer in building physics at the University of Sheffield. Here I'm French, but I came to the UK as an undergrad to study aeronautical engineering at Imperial College. And when I was almost done with my studies, I had discovered the CDT for fluid dynamics at Imperial. And I decided to join because I enjoyed fluids and I wanted to learn more about it. And I was really attracted by the CDT because it was taught by different departments across the university that all covered fluids. So I thought it would be a good way to see how fluids was done in different ways. So I did, as part of this, I did an MRS project looking at tidal lagoons. And then I started doing my PhD in the Department of Civil Engineering, looking at modeling natural ventilated rooms and flows. And then looking at how that affects pollution distribution in the room and indoor air quality. That became really interesting to a lot of people during the COVID pandemic. And then I continued this work in a flu as a postdoc in a few research projects. So at Imperial, and then working in Cambridge, I was working on with Claudia on the same project for a while, looking at indoor air quality in classrooms and how you might be able to measure that using local sensors. So as I said, I joined the University of Sheffield as a lecturer quite recently in September. So that's all for me.
Hi, my name is Talia Tokyay, and I am originally from Turkey, and okay, sorry. So I'm from Turkey, and my background is also in civil engineering. After receiving my diploma, I went for a master's to United States. I got my master's degree and continued with a PhD at the University of Iowa at Iowa Institute of Hydraulic Research. And well, one thing led to another, and I found myself back in Europe. And since I think 2020, I'm working as a senior hydraulic engineer at Mott MacDonald. I spent quite a bit of time in the university, but right now I am more with the industry. So I know taste of both, I guess, in a way. And yeah.
Hi everybody, my name's Guneet and I graduated from the University of Leeds. I did the integrated masters in aeronautical and aerospace engineering. After I graduated, I went straight into industry, so I've been at Arup for 7 years ever since. So I work in the environmental physics department, which is where our fluid dynamics kind of expertise sits. So we're a consultancy, so we work on pretty much anything in the built environment. So I sort of use CFD in anything from building physics, pedestrian wind comfort, data centres, reservoirs, sewage systems. So when I kind of was graduating and deciding where I wanted to go, that was sort of something that really grabbed me, was being able to use this expertise in fluid dynamics in such a wide range of contexts. So now I'm a senior engineer at Arup and yeah, really enjoying it.
Hello, everybody. If you don't know me, I've been at Leeds. I was at Leeds for over 20 years and now as Chancellor, which is a very nice job, making students happy. I also work at the British Antarctic Survey, and your talk this morning, Anne, was particularly inspiring because we have 5 aircraft and we're starting to fly them with sustainable fuels. So we've really got a very tight net zero agenda. So I'm going to the Whittle Lab when I get back to see if we can make links there and start doing some research, because we fly several different types of aircraft in very cold environments, in very remote environments, which is a real challenge. But that's quite interesting. I am a geologist by training. In BAS, we do, in the Antarctic Survey, we do a lot of fluid dynamics research, glaciers, ice flow, ocean currents, atmospheric science. So there's a lot that people do. As a geologist, though, I would just say I know that on the 29th of January, the university is starting its geothermal project, and there are 8 test wells across campus. And there must be huge potential to do some really interesting fluid research between those test sites. So I hope that somebody's involved in that in future.
That's the case. So thanks for the introductions. I think maybe it would be good just to ask you to think a little bit about, you're talking primarily here to a university audience, not exclusively, but also research councils. And what do you think we might do better? What do we do well? Let's start with some positive, but what might we do better to broaden out the participation in fluid dynamics? And that can start at undergraduate level or postgraduate level, wherever you think. Would anybody like to kick off?
Can I start? Well, I think one of the crucial things is to have more women kind of at the front of projects and outreach, especially. I forgot to mention something, which is that I am also founder of a Women in Engineering group in Colombia, where I'm from, in Bolivar, which is the region where I'm from. And with the group, we often go to schools. My mom is a preschool teacher, so I often go to my mom's school when I visit, and usually do some activities with the children. And one of the things that I noticed is that children mostly know about professions like maybe teacher because they have a teacher, or doctor because they go to the doctor. So they're maybe not that exposed to people that work in fluid dynamics or engineering, for instance. So that's kind of one of the things, I think, just having examples of people that are in the field and kind of tangible ones, people that you see, I think it's more impactful than people that maybe just see on TV or kind of like very far. So I think that's one of the main things, doing a lot of outreach and teaching kids what fluid dynamics is and how it's applicable to so many things.
Thank you. And I agree. And I think, yeah, so outreach is a very powerful tool. And I think one thing that makes fluids special, and I think we need to do more about, is showing the diversity of things that are related to fluids and what you can do by studying fluids and what it might lead to. So I think maybe the first time I ever heard that word was I was in high school and I was doing something to teach me a bit about piloting. So piloting a plane, so a bit about aviation. And I think talked about fluid dynamics by saying, oh, those people doing very hard maths, and that allows you to do all those things. But I think so aeronautics is really cool and it's a good topic, but I think quite often that might be the only thing you think about when you think about fluid dynamics. And it's very nice, and some people are really driven by this, but it's really good to show as well that the range of things you can do with fluids and the range of careers that studying such a topic might lead to.
I think we're going, like in the line here, but I agree with Claudia, and I think, like it's very important to have a role model. I mean, talking about mums, my mom is the first woman PhD in Iowa Institute of Hydraulic Research, and I grew up hearing all these things about, like Reynolds number, fruit number. I grew up thinking that I should learn these things. Who is this Bernoulli that they're talking about? So, having a role model starting at a very early age, introducing those concepts really impacts you. And I agree that, like, we talked about aeronautics, we talked about aviation, but for me, mostly it's water. And water is also a very, very important piece of this fluid dynamics. So it's important to understand, with the climate change, with everything coming into, into our radar, understanding the water behavior more and more is important. And it's very, the way you said, challenging in terms of maths and everything. It's still a problem that, we don't know the solution of fully. So outreach programs, having those role models in front of you, putting those role models into people's, reach, in a way is very important, I think, in terms of making people learn at an early age what fluid dynamics is and how important it is.
I think what the university is doing really well, and as we've seen, like today, 2 keynote speakers that are female, really resonates, because we want to kind of see people that are like us and look like us in those sorts of careers. I mean, in industry, I find now at sort of my level, we have a good mix of male and female, but as you sort of start to look towards leadership, that's where the percentages sort of change quite drastically. Hopefully that will change as we're going forward. But that kind of idea of mentorship, I think, is really important. I mean, personally, I opened my eyes to fluid dynamics after I studied, because I sort of learned it in quite a niche way. It was when I was looking for jobs that I sort of started seeing really the potential, and maybe that undergraduate level of awareness is where the university could do a bit more. So communities like this, opening it up to the undergraduates. I really love how there's the link between the engineering, the maths, the physics, and opening that up at that sort of level, I think could have a really big impact.
Antarctica is absolutely traditionally the place for white young men with beards. And so we've had a great effort to make sure that we diversify polar science. So just something that we've done in the past, because we have a very big EDI program that's quite successful. But it's about getting people in the first place at the younger levels. So we had a really successful internship program. We got a little bit of money from UKRI, and we advertised for around schools and at university level for people to come into our offices in Cambridge and spend even just a week or even a few days just to see what scientists do and to see what scientists there are. And we also linked up in COVID times. We actually linked up people just by through Zoom across universities, polar sciences across the universities, so that school children and university undergraduates could link to somebody and have a friend, a mentor, and a chat. And that's worked really well. And in fact, some of the interns that we've had now work for BAS because they want to come in. And we are slowly diversifying, not just women, but all kinds of the minority groups.
Anybody in the audience want to ask anything?
Sorry, I'll have to turn around to see me. Apologies. I was wondering whether any of the companies or organisations you work in, have you seen women working successfully part-time? We all know that obviously there's big barriers in the obvious thing that women are the ones who generally do more of the childcare and want to come back part-time and those kinds of things. Do you think you have role models who are leaders who are not there all of the time?
I'll answer part of that. So I myself work part-time for quite a while because of health, and I thought that there was going to be a big barrier for me progressing in my career, but thankfully well, at the moment I work full-time. But when I started working for this company, or when I was being interviewed, I thought that the fact that I had worked part-time for a period of time was going to be considered as a negative thing, but nobody ever asked me why I was working part-time. So I think there are probably lots of places where part-time work is a barrier, but I think there are also many where people can be really understanding. Also, there's a lot more opportunities, I think, for flexible working and also for job share. I don't think, sadly, I don't think I know anyone in a very high kind of powerful position that works part-time. So yeah, maybe that's something to really think about.
I mean, personally speaking, from Mott MacDonald perspective, I have observed that there are many women working part-time and still, like taking whatever reason, but most of the time, like maternity leaves and coming back, like with back to their position and being able to, like ease in, perhaps not working full-time and everything. So I think there is a change in that perception, and there is a change that companies are nowadays pushing. And maybe it's not as fast, but very recently, for instance, for Mott MacDonald, again, specifically talking, they introduced a big paternity leave, which actually gives a chance for the woman to return back as well, isn't it? So there is that change. There is that talk of this kind of, like part-time work or work-life balance, and figuring out how to do the best. More so, I think, after the pandemic, because we learned that we can work differently.
Thank you. I think that's a really good question, and it's a very good point to bring up. And I think in academia, I haven't really seen a lot of examples, and I haven't seen examples for over a very long period to see how it turns out and whether it helps or not progression and that kind of stuff. Throughout my kind of academic career, or maybe through my studies, I've never been supervised by a woman. So I think that's also, and I've never been supervised by someone who works part-time. So I think that does show that there is a bit of an issue there. Since starting to work in Sheffield, I've seen quite a few of my colleagues are working part-time as lecturers, both male and female. So I'm waiting to see how that pans out and how they handle it, because it is a question how, and it's something I'm wondering about personally, what will happen to me if I decide to work part-time.
Any other questions? Yeah.
You've all come in by slightly different routes, but you've all stayed in roles that are science or engineering. What is it that and most of which involve fluid dynamics in some way or another? What is it that sort of excites you about that? What like motivates you to, what do you really like about fluid dynamics or the science or engineering that you work on?
For me, it's So solving those societal challenges, as Professor Ann Dowling was sort of presenting, you know, sustainability and climate change, those kind of problems that the world are facing, like really interest me. And the fact that my expertise can be used to solve that, I think is a really strong push for me. And also the skills you learn from, you know, studying fluid dynamics or working in this area are very transferable. So for instance, I didn't work in kind of weather data before, but kind of having this knowledge about fluid dynamics was able to kind of fork my career. And we've sort of spoken about, you know, squiggly careers before, where you're not sort of just on one path and you follow that. But this idea that you can sort of change direction, I think fluid dynamics really allows that because it is so broad.
I think that's a really interesting question, because another issue perhaps that we don't think about a lot is desertion, and people that actually get into these sort of careers at first and then quit it. For instance, when I was studying civil engineering, I thought about quitting a lot of times, and my dad is a civil engineer too, so he was always quite supportive, but I had like a rebellious phase where I was still studying civil engineering, but I wasn't really dedicating quite a lot to my studies, and I was kind of forced to have a mentorship session with one of the 3 only female lecturers, and she sat with me and said, what is it that you like, Claudia? And I was like, why do you ask me that? And she said, well, I think you're a very intelligent person, and if you wanted to do well, you would be one of the best in the class. So I think it's that probably you like something else. So I said, well, I at the time I wanted to be a writer, and I said to her, well, I want to be a writer. And she said, well, if you want to be a writer, but if you are going to stick to doing civil engineering, dedicate more of your time, study more, you would do well. And that was like a shift that really changed me. So like from that moment on, I was the best student, which is quite funny to think about. So having had that person kind of open my eyes at that moment, and also I think the fact that she was a woman perhaps made her feel more comfortable to have such a personal conversation with me. So it's not directly an answer to your question, but it's talking about how we keep people doing STEM subjects, women in the STEM subjects. Yeah.
Just a few things slightly differently. I stayed in science because I think when you have to have a passion for science, and I just love the planet and just stay with it. But a few things that I've learned actually through my career is that I personally think that women work slightly differently to men, and science has traditionally tended to be a very focused individual science. The ivory tower type scientist, male scientist, still gets to the top quite a bit. And I think women, personally, in my experience, like to work more as a team. So I think being able to have a lot more team working in science generally is a much more encouraging environment. In the Antarctic survey, I have a team that works with me. So I have 5 directors that work with me, and we do have a diversity problem in my team, I have to admit, because we only have 1 man, so it's a bit imbalanced. But so I think that's really important for some women and a lot of men. But I think the changing aspect of science is really important. Change the way people work.
And just to add on to that, I think so. One reason I work in science and I want to stay in science is I do like doing something different maybe every day. And so I do like this aspect of always learning something new. There's always something new to discover. And that's kind of scientifically, but also doing new things, so working in new ways, working collaboratively. I think I was always a bit daunted by working on my own in this lab. And then I've slowly realized that there's so much more to this, loads of different types of works. I've recently started teaching, for example. So there's always a new challenge of a new thing to do, a new way to do things. And I think that's why it's quite exciting as well.
I was about to say that, you know, like in terms of learning, so it's like big challenges are important and you feel, you know, like you were involved in, you know, understanding that bigger picture. But I also enjoy the small bits as well. If I'm having a, you know, like a simple reservoir and I'm looking at some sort of, you know, like flow distribution or things that you don't really think that, you know, that important might be, you know, like impactful, even if it is for a smaller region, smaller, you know, like a group of people. And if you're able to, you know, like get involved in that and learn something while doing it, I think it excites me and it makes me keep on going. Computational fluid dynamics, I'm also, you know, like into that. So computational fluid dynamics has that bit also, that the things that maybe you cannot observe so easily if you are, you know, like doing you know, a physical lab work, gives you that chance and ask those questions. Is this correct? Is this not? What am I looking at? Those things, you know, like excites me every day, I guess, that I'm still, you know, like in fluid dynamics.
The next question, please don't necessarily answer in terms of gender. I'm just curious to know in your own reflections of what the biggest barrier that you feel you've overcome to get to where you are in your career at this stage, and you know, what perhaps how that occurred, or what you're most proud of that you had to overcome or achieve in order to get to where you are. Thank you.
Feels kind of funny that, you know, like I keep on talking, I guess, but in my opinion, there are two steps in that. One is your own mental setup. If as a woman, how you feel, you know, like I have this example, and I don't know if my partner would be happy that I'm giving this example, but being only male in the room, he told me after a meeting that he was in you know, one of the universities, that, oh, I was the only man in the room. And then I said, like, I walked into so many rooms and I was the only woman, and I never thought of it, because you have to overcome of that your own inhibitions in a way. You have to feel like I will be there, I am important, and I'm going to say my bit. And if they take it, they take it. If they don't, you get angry, but you carry on. The other bit is changing the mental setup of men that you're working with. I guess it's more, they have to learn that sometimes they have these unconscious biases, and you have to point out in a way that, and if you think that that person is ready to learn, maybe they will be, you know, like they will progress and they will understand that they're wrong. And those are the challenges that I sometimes feel that, you know, like it's hard to overcome. I still have to tell myself every once in a while that, okay, you know, I'm going to tell my bit. I should not feel, you know, any less than anybody in that room. So I think those are the challenges that I every day face, and I have to, you know, like work on it.
I think that's a really good point. It's also other people's mindsets. So for me, it's our clients as well. You know, the awareness that they have of sort of when we go into a client meeting, not automatically looking at the person that looks the most senior because they're the oldest or white male and they're ready to present, but it's actually you. So that's also, you know, it's the people that we're working with, their mindsets as well. But I also get really bad imposter syndrome. So personally, you know, thinking, you know, oh, there's no one that looks like me here. Should I be here? So yeah, that's also a personal barrier that I think like overcoming is important.
I could go right back to the 70s when women weren't employed on rigs and things, but more recently, it's interesting in my career. The biggest not setback, but if you like, surprise as when I became director of BAS, because it's, you know, it is a typically, it has been male-dominated post. And I think the first week when I was in my office late, unpacking my boxes, and the security guard was helping me, very friendly. And after a couple of hours, we left, and he said, "Are you the new director's secretary then?" And for a year or two, I got that quite often. People would say, "Oh, you're a director. Okay, what do you direct then? And who's the director?" Quite often.
So I have a team of 3 women, 3 men, and just not recently, maybe over the last 3 years, I've been hearing in the school the women mentioning that there's some extra load and burden. So you've talked about outreach. So if I was asked to go and give some form of outreach, I would have to choose the women to go and represent, just to be showing that there are women in my group, and then they start thinking, "Oh no, he's going to come and ask me to do this," or is it like, "Oh great, we're going to go out and talk about our work"? And so at what point does that balance of, "Oh, we've got to ask women to do it," about my language there, apologies, I have been in the training, but I'm from the 70s, so actually I've got a lot of tradition to undo. So, but yes, that's the point I was making, is at what point does that become a burden on women to do more, or should I be somehow representing women in my work?
No, I think that's a really good point, and it is a big, yeah, because we want to show this diversity of people, but we don't want to burden always the same people. So I think it's a very tricky balance to have. And I think one way maybe to go about this is for this outreach not to be an extra thing to do on top of everything else, but to be recognized as a very important part of the work. And so it can be shared maybe more equally. And for sale, I don't know, so think about how the work is divided up, and if female colleagues have to go in, maybe male colleagues can help prepare, or I don't know, think a bit more about the division of the work. But it's I mean, awareness is already a very good first step, and making sure that it doesn't always fall on the same people.
But I'm thinking about, you've talked about outreach and making women in fluids more visible, but then it starts becoming a burden upon you then to, I've got to sort of say to the women to go out and do that for me. It's really difficult.
Yeah, and I think part of this can be helped if outreach is recognized as a very important part of the job. And so say when it comes to promotion, it's not only about number of articles, number of citation, but also those outreach activities for funding as well. Yeah, and I think it's an overall thing that needs to be handled.
I mean, we could broaden it. I think, you know, the University of Leeds, for example, has a policy, rightly so, that we try and have gender diversity on all of our appointing panels and our promotion panels. But if you're in an organisation where you're 80% male and 20% female, then you're going to be disproportionately asked to spend time on that. And clearly, it's important that you feel that's something that's recognised and in your workload and will be recognised in. Do you feel that in your any of you feel in your current roles you do get asked to do things disproportionately for that reason, or is it something that is on your mind?
Personally, yes, but I don't think it's a bad thing. I quite like taking I think it's a good opportunity to take those, take those and, get myself out there. I really enjoy those kind of STEM activities. And I think just back to your question, kind of sharing the workload, as you said, giving those opportunities to actually everyone in the team. I think it is important to get, women in front of STEM activities, but just as important to also give all kind of the colleagues the opportunities to do those sort of things. So where you can have a mix, I think that makes the biggest impact. Because, yeah, I found in our company, actually a lot of women are the people doing the outreach because they want to. But then sometimes we get, we go into schools and there's 4 women doing an outreach activity, and that's not quite, that what the real industry is like. And I think a mix is generally, as we know, the diversity just improves the activity in itself as well.
Yeah, no, please.
I think, like the starting point is also very good, that you are open to have that conversation. And I think it cut both ways, that maybe honesty is also part of the thing, right? You ask the question, is this too much of a burden for you? You know, I'm offering this to you, but are you bored of this? To the person, and the person should have that kind of feel. I mean, these are the boundaries that's hard to, you know, like sometimes overcome, I guess, but the person also that you're asking should be able to say, yeah, now it's enough, maybe not today, maybe next time I'll do it, kind of a thing. It's tough, that's true. But also, if you don't put the woman at the forefront, how will you increase that number that you are looking for, that increase?
Andrew.
We've talked a lot about the diversity of applications in fluid dynamics, and it's quite interesting when you look across the different kind of groups in Leeds. There's a huge range in terms of the diversity. So some subjects are still very white male dominated, and others are much more diverse. So do you think there's opportunities there for using fluid dynamics, using that diversity to help some of those problem areas, those areas where there's less diversity? And how might we go about that?
Fluid dynamics is very diverse, and we also work with a lot of, well, in industry, we also work with a lot of other areas of kind of world. So with the social sciences, with the arts, being creative, you know, with architects. So kind of bringing those sort of, you know, people together at a degree level, yeah, that could be really beneficial and kind of open the eyes into areas where there's sort of the problem, as you said, yeah. Yeah, I think that doing that at the sort of undergraduate or postgraduate level could be really beneficial. Because, yeah, in industry, we don't just work with people in fluid dynamics. We do generally tend to, you know, work with the wider world.
I'll always remember one day when I was in Leeds and I had to give a talk about sort of leadership and things to a class in design, in a design school. And I walked into the lecture theatre and I did gasp, I think, because of the whole audience in front of me. There must have been about, I don't know, 50 women, and there was right in the middle, there was one man. So I think spreading the word across the campus into the art subject as well will be very good.
Any other questions or comments? I suppose a question then I could ask is there anything you think, we talked about outreach being important, but is there anything you think needs to change within the way the education of our mathematicians, engineers, physicists? Maybe it's about more of that interdisciplinarity, I don't know, but I'd be interested if there's anything you think could be done to make the education that we offer more likely to cause people to stay in STEM and fluids.
I think from working in outreach in schools, like with fluid dynamics, we have these great fun experiments that we think, you know, children will really get involved with, you know, get engaged with. But schools have such a hard time because they have to keep to the curriculum and they already have, you know, such tight time. So really thinking about that when we do go and do those kind of activities, how does this link to the curriculum? How does this actually help the teacher rather than just bringing that awareness? And I think that's where it's most powerful. And then you get the most engagement from schools that you're kind of part of their curriculum.
I think this is not only like relevant to women, but also talking about diversity as like a more general thing, as in talking about people of color and people from impoverished backgrounds. I think the universities sometimes can seem to focus quite a lot on the academic side, and when selling.
It's fine if you, yeah, if it's near.
When kind of selling different programs to students, maybe we're not translating the kind of economic aspect of it. I, for instance, made the decision of studying engineering because I like math. My dad is an engineer, and there was this kind of message that you could find a job if you were an engineer. And I think many people, like from minority backgrounds or poor backgrounds, make their life decisions thinking of that. Am I going to find a job? And there's many jobs in fluid dynamics, but are we selling that? Are we telling people what they could do when they graduate? Because I think that's kind of like a main aspect when choosing a career. If you know that you're not going to inherit a lot of money from your parents.
I guess at least this report that we have now gives us the opportunity to talk about the number and opportunities of jobs in fluid dynamics. That's nice. Yeah.
So thinking 10 years in the future, at the 15th birthday of LIFID, what would you like to see in terms of the shape of the fluid dynamics community then?
Can I answer that? I think I'd like to go to a conference. First of all, I'd like to go to a conference and not be the only Black person there. I think I'd also like to kind of do a little bit of rebranding and not sell fluid dynamics so much as a kind of like a pure math or pure physics, and show the applied side of it too. Not because there's anything wrong with pure math and pure physics, but because I think lots of people might, or quite a few people might not be interested in that side, but interested in the applications, and that's kind of like a way of bringing in more people to doing fluid dynamics.
Or maybe one thing that would be quite nice is not, hopefully we wouldn't need a panel like this anymore. Maybe even be more cheeky and have a panel about where did the men go? And then I think that would be very nice.
Well, I mean, yeah, go ahead if you have.
It's a nice opportunity to probably reflect in 10 years' time how, hopefully how far we've come since the 5th birthday, and really see the progress made.
And it's not just about women, is it? It's about the whole diversity, that neurodiversity, physical diversity, all kinds of things. And I think that's where we should be working more now to encourage everyone.
I think, like if we want to think about in 15 years time, I would like to feel the way we talked about, or I said about the inhibitions and everything, and inclusivity and diversity in all ways. We should not feel, like underrepresented, or we should not feel like the way you said we should have these, like talks, or we should be able to talk about fluid dynamics without, like talking about where we're coming from, what our skin color is, what our backgrounds is, all sorts of other things. It's more about, like what we need to solve as problems rather than, how many of us are represented. We should all be, like represented in a way that we feel comfortable, hopefully.
Can I ask a question? Yeah. Can I ask Anne to comment? Because Anne's been here, gave us an amazing talk this morning, and you've got to one of the highest positions in, a very prestigious university. You must have a huge number of stories about where you've had to challenge. How did you get to your position? Both in your science, but also in Cambridge, which is a very traditional, challenging route.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I've just enjoyed what I've done. I mean, often I have been in a meeting and I've been the only woman there, but I've been chairing it. So, I kept the men in line and they did what we needed to get on and do. It sounds naive, but it is and I'm going back to the 70s. I started at Cambridge in 1970. So, this is history. It's not current practice, but it was an advantage. I did maths. There was a class of over 300, and there were less than 30 women there. I was at Girth and we used to sit together in the front row till we got to know the boys. Anyway, that was probably the first week. But, you know, it's an advantage. If I, as a student, talked at a conference, people remembered me. And that was a huge advantage. You got known. But I really do recognise the overwork aspects. Everybody wants a woman on every committee, and you've got to try and learn to say no. And I've never managed that as well as I should. So I don't think there's an answer. Actually, I think the answer is to do what you enjoy doing. To be honest, and if you enjoy it, people warm to what you're doing and come with you. And I do think teamwork is hugely important, but that's actually the problems now, and the range of techniques we've got to solve them are beyond the capability of any one person. So all of discovery has to be in teams, and that plays to women's strengths no end. It really does, because I think we're very good at, I mean, I don't want to generalize because that's bad too, but we are often good at parking our egos and getting everybody to work together. And that's actually what discovery needs. The brilliant isolated person they're only in niche areas. Does that go far these days? So I think we've got everything to play for. Position of strength.
It's just to thank you for making this part of the agenda and kind of highlighting the importance of it, really. I think that's a really powerful, you know, thing to highlight to everyone, that this is, and we can have everyone as allies as well. So kind of having these open and honest conversations is really a great start to sort of going forward.
Well, thank you very much indeed for allowing us to ask